Came up in conversation on a show the other day. Laws, basically crime and punishment and prevention. And my contention was that largely laws do not prevent crime, at least not 100% of the time. If someone wants to commit a crime, they're going to commit a crime, regardless of whether the law is there or not. So I did a quick Google search and came up with this report that was prepared back in 2019 for the the Minnesota State House, written by a guy named Ben Johnson, of all names. And the title is Do Criminal Laws Deter Crime? Deterrence Theory in Criminal Justice Policy, a primer. So I figured what we'll do is just go through the whole report. It's about 26 pages, and I'm basically going to read it and just kind of comment as I go along. So here's the executive summary. This publication discusses criminal deterrence, which is one theory legislators can use to assess possible changes in criminal justice policy. When legislators consider changes to criminal justice policy, they often face the question of whether the changes will prevent people from committing crimes. Legislators in Minnesota may look at other states to see if changes were produced there produced any noticeable effect, but that information may not always present a complete picture. Another tool for legislators is deterrence theory. Deterrence theory was first described in the late 1700s, but received new attention in the 1960s. Academic studies since then have looked at the relationship between the severity of punishment, the certainty that a criminal will be punished, and the speed with which the punishment will be inflicted. Looking at both long-term trends and smaller case studies, research has shed light on behaviors that can be deterred most easily, policy changes that have little deterrent effect, and the types of actions that are most likely to prevent people from committing crimes. For example, research has shown that crimes involving conscious planning can be more easily deterred than those that relate to addiction or sudden emotions, outbursts, anger. Increases to prison sentences that are already lengthy have little deterrent effect, and policies that increase the likelihood of being caught deter crime more effectively than those that increase punishment. Deterrence theory can help legislators craft and assess policy proposals. Want to stop right here right quick and address that the second and the third bullet points. I want to emphasize that lengthening prison sentences have little deterrent effect, according to this report, and policies that increase the likelihood of being caught deter crime more effectively than those that increase punishment. Basically, a police presence. I have heard, rumor has it that, police are afraid to go into high crime areas, that sort of thing. If you're not there, if you're not there, and you're, a police department, if you're not there, if you don't have a presence, you will not deter crime. And I still hold that if a person wants to commit a crime, the law in the books in and of itself is not a deterrent. Actually, the punishment that the law specifies is the deterrent. Saying murder is illegal on paper means nothing if it's not if there are no consequences. So laws on the books are not deterrents in and of themselves. I stand by that. Okay, so now we'll get into the introduction here. Uh, I'll read the little quotation at the top. Among the many objects to which a wise and free people find it necessary to direct their attention, that of providing for their safety seems to be the first. That's John Jay, Federalist Papers. He was actually one of the framers of the Constitution. So this introduction reads as follows. One of the primary responsibilities of a government is to protect its citizens from crime, but preventing crime can only take many forms. There is evidence that crime is disproportionately concentrated in economically distressed areas, and that reducing poverty can also reduce crime. Again, this is something we tend to go round and round about. Crime correlates with, quote, economic distress. So it does not matter the community, whether it's a lot of crime or a little crime. Crime correlates with low income, and this does get into why that is, I believe. Skip ahead a little bit. The government identifies actions it wants to prohibit: assault, selling drugs, driving while intoxicated, speeding, and establishes a consequence for people who take these actions. Consequences exist for several reasons. They punish dangerous behavior, require some form of repayment to society, incapacitate individuals who are seen as likely to commit other offenses, and send the message that society has certain values, morals, and expectations. Several theories of public safety support these policy methods of enforcing laws and punishing offenders. Skipping, well, you know what, I do want to read this paragraph. Several theories of public safety support these policy methods of enforcing laws and punishing offenders. The theory of incapacitation suggests that holding certain individuals in jail or prison will prevent those individuals from committing new crimes, recidivism. Rehabilitation theory suggests that directing offenders to certain treatment or training programs will change that individual and keep him or her from committing new offenses. Retributive, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Retributive theories suggest that a person who makes an intentional decision to violate the law should be punished for that decision so that the person can pay a debt to society and then return with a blank slate. Rarely does it work that way. You know, if you get a record, it tends to stick with you. Denunciation theory combines several other theories and holds that punishing someone publicly will prevent others from committing the offense due to the stigma of offense, and will also serve as a form of retribution. Each of these theories can support criminal justice policies and serve as a valid lens through which to view policies. But legislators often identify another reason to justify changes to criminal law, that is deterrence. And this is kind of the crux. I don't know that, laws are effective. Having laws, in my opinion, does not deter people from breaking them. So, it says here, deterrence is a theory that criminal penalties do not just punish violators, but also discourage other people from committing similar offenses. Many people point to the need to deter criminal actions after after a high-profile incident in which an offender is seen to have received a light sentence. Some argue that a tougher sentence would have prevented the tragedy and can prevent a similar tragedy from taking place in the future. I disagree. I think if somebody's going to commit a crime, they're going to commit a crime. And somewhere in here, it also points out that if a person thinks they can get away with it, they're more likely to commit that crime. So that'll come up in a little bit. So this publication focuses on the theory of general deterrence by explaining the theoretical basis of deterrence theory, reviewing academic studies, and providing a summary of what legislators can consider if deterrence is the goal. And I just, I have my doubts. I'm sure the punishment is the deterrent. The law itself, like you cannot, the speed limit is 55. People go over 55 all the time, just to, make a, maybe not a great example, but, it serves my purpose. So next we will go through the economic model of deterrence. So we'll read the little quote at the top from Jeremy Bentham, 18th century philosopher. I know who Bentham is, never read him. He says the first objective is to prevent all sorts of offenses as far as this is worthwhile. Therefore, the value of the punishment must always be sufficient to outweigh the value of the profit of the offense. So basically, make the make committing the crime not worth your while. So we'll go over the historical roots of deterrence theory. The roots of modern deterrence theory stretch to a time when the United States was coming into existence. An Italian philosopher and economist, Cesare Beccaria, wrote Essay on Crimes and Punishments in 1764, and Jeremy Bentham, the English philosopher and reformer, wrote an introduction to the principles of morals and legislation in 1781. So Beccaria wrote that laws exist to allow a united society, free from the threat of war and chaos. So basically, laws unite. He assumed that each individual member of the society will always endeavor to take away from the mass not only his own portion, but to encroach on that of others. Basically, kind of like the law of what is it? Basically, social Darwinism. The strong will survive and take the portion of the weaker. So, assuming that people will just go ahead and encroach on other people's, quote, portions, laws were necessary, therefore, and a violation of laws should result in punishment whose purpose is no other than to prevent others from committing the like offense. Bentham argued that punishment must be proportionate to the crime committed, because if two crimes have an equal punishment, there is nothing to deter men from committing the greater crime. Let's see. I'm sorry, I said Bentham talked about this. It's Beccaria. Beccaria also emphasized that punishment should occur as immediately after the commission of a crime as possible, and added that crimes are more effectually prevented by the certainty rather than the severity of punishment. I assume he means certainty of being caught. So Jeremy Bentham's theories were similar. He began from the proposition that humans are governed by pain and pleasure. He argued that every action a person takes is to increase happiness. The principle of utility held that people act to either produce advantage or prevent pain or unhappiness. The value of a pleasure or pain depends on its intensity, duration, certainty, and nearness. So I'm going to skip this last paragraph. It's kind of like a summary. And then we'll go into what is being called a modern makeover. Okay, the little quote at the top says the approach taken here follows the economist's usual analysis of choice and assumes that a person commits an offense if the expected utility to him exceeds the utility he could get by using his time and other resources at other activities. This is by a guy named Gary Becker, an economist and a sociologist. Um, and apparently, he wrote a book called Crime and Punishment, An Economic Approach in 1968. He was at the University of Chicago. He argued that understanding criminal behavior did not depend on whether individuals had properly developed social standards, psychological inadequacies, or special inherited traits. Rather, he suggested, criminal behavior came down to an economic theory of choice. Some individuals become criminals because their individual benefits and costs are different from those of the non-criminal, and not because the person has different basic motivations. Becker emphasized that an increase in the likelihood of apprehension would have a greater impact on the number of offenses than an increase in punishment. And I kind of agree with that. Basically put the work in at the front end to prevent crime. He also noted that making legal activities more attractive, such as an increase in legal income, would shift the balance and make it more likely that a person would not commit a crime. He's kind of hinting that, if you're looking at this economically, basically, poor or working poor, economically are more likely to commit crime. It's kind of saying that in a fancier way. He came up with a model of deterrence known as economic model of rational deterrence. Under this theory, since criminal acts are the result of a rational, conscious decision, preventing crime involves finding the balance between increasing the cost of crime and creating an expensive police state that eliminates personal freedom. So once the cost of committing an offense is too high, criminals will not commit the offense. The theory assumes that there's no difference between criminal and non-criminals other than their assessment of the costs and benefits of committing crimes. Not sure that I totally buy into this, but again, the cost, I'm assuming by cost he means the punishment, is actually what stops the crime, not so much the law that's calling it a crime. Okay, we're going to skip ahead a little bit. We're going to go to three components of deterrence theory: certainty, celerity, and severity. Certainty applies to the likelihood of being caught. Celerity applies to to the speed of a consequence, basically between crime and punishment, the time between. And then severity of punishment is a necessary component, since a rational person might commit a crime that brings benefit even if the punishment is swift, and sure when the punishment is insignificant. So basically the level of punishment needs to fit the severity of the crime. Says here, under the economic theory of deterrence, an increase in the cost of the crime should deter people from committing the crime, and there is evidence that individuals who believe they are likely to be arrested and punished are less likely to commit a crime than those who do not expect to be captured or punished. So basically, if you think you can get away with it, you're going to commit the crime if you're so inclined. So to increase the cost, the government can increase the likelihood that a person will be caught, or they can increase the speed with which a person receives punishment, or the severity of the punishment. They're determining the extent to which these changes actually deter crime involves testing the assumption that the crime rate will be lower if there's an increase in either celerity, certainty, celerity, or severity of legal punishment. And I'm not going to I think we pretty much are clear on what the three are. He does ask the question, Ben Johnson asks the question, but are these three components equal? I don't know. We might want to read through this. Basically, he's talking severity, celerity, certainty. Are the three components equal? Basically, if you increase any one of these, will the outcome be less crime? It says here, severity of punishment was long thought to be the key component in deterring criminal behavior. As a result, lawmakers relied on the use of severe sanctions to determine crime. However, little research examined the deterrent effect of severe punishments until the 1960s. Basically, it was kind of like intuitive, or actually it was counterintuitive that, after a certain point, severity of punishment doesn't have a deterrent effect. It says here, initial research supported the theory that severe punishments deter crime. A series of studies examining homicide rates found that the severity of punishment for homicide had a deterrent effect. However, when the examination expanded beyond homicide, there was a surprise. The severity of the penalty had a positive effect on the crimes of rape, assault, larceny, robbery, burglary, and auto theft. That is, severity of punishment did not deter crime. If anything, it had the opposite effect. So for anything that was less than actual homicide, it seems increasing the penalty didn't really have a lessening effect for, again, anything less than homicide. So it says here, and I think a lot of times, homicides tend to be rash actions, not, rationally thought out, a lot of emotion or even addiction involved. So that could be a reason, I guess. It says here, not all crimes involve a rational decision. Criminal acts may be driven by many factors. Many crimes take place when the offender is under the influence of drugs or alcohol. One last part, subjective beliefs about severity do not match the likely sentence. On its face, severity of punishment appears to be an objective fact. A person commits an offense and receives a known sentence. However, actual consequences may differ based on multiple factors, and a potential offender may not have accurate information about a likely sanction. The state can raise the maximum penalty for an offense, but that does not necessarily change the expectations of someone who might be considering committing a crime. If a person is weighing the benefits of committing a crime against the potential consequences of the act, it is the potential offender's actual belief that about a likely sanction that matters. The majority of offenders who have been interviewed report they did not know what potential sentence they faced. Not surprisingly, then, many reported that they did not consider the potential sentence at all before acting. Increasing penalties cannot have any effect if potential offenders are not aware of the change. So, again, laws, and even in this case, even the penalties may not work as a preventative. This is something that's rather interesting. It says here, offenders who serve long sentences are more likely to reoffend. Wow, that's counterintuitive. Studies indicate that individuals punished more severely commit more crimes in the future. A review of 50 studies dating back as far as 1958 showed that inmates who served longer prison sentences, those with an average of about 30 months, had a higher recidivism rate than those who served sentences with an average length of 12.9 months. Now, I'd be interested to know were the crimes, was it across a specific type of crime, or did the crime actually matter? Well, there is some evidence of specific deterrence related to shorter sentences. There's no there's no such finding for long sentences. That is, studies have shown that offenders who serve shorter sentences are less likely to reoffend, while those who serve longer sentences are not. Research has not shown prison to be the best method of preventing offenders from reoffending. So, again, the punishment doesn't necessarily stop someone from committing a crime. Individuals serving any prison time reoffended at a higher rate than those who remain in the community. That's interesting. This is both true in the United States and in Finland. Several theories exist to explain this result. Some inmates may learn new criminal skills while incarcerated. I was thinking that myself. Others may feel additional resentment to society, losing any positive connections to work, family, and non-criminal friends. In addition, while studies attempt to control for the seriousness of the offense, which is answering my earlier question, offenders sent to prison have often shown a propensity towards criminal activities by establishing a longer criminal history or failing to succeed while supervised on the community. Prison may be a factor in increasing the likelihood that an individual will reoffend, but differences between individuals sent to prison and those placed under supervision and kept in the community make it difficult to determine how significant a role imprisonment plays. So, the effectiveness of putting someone in prison is not as certain as, the law and order hardliners would have you think it is. So we talked about severity. Let's talk about certainty, basically the certainty that the crime will be detected. Basically, a person will be caught committing the crime. Certainty of punishment is generally considered to be more important than the severity of that punishment. Indeed, studies suggest that the deterrent effect of certainty is far stronger than that of severity. So again, if you think you can get away with it, you're more likely to commit a crime. The law does not, in and of itself, act as a preventative. Let's see, is there anything else here? Like severity, increasing the certainty of punishment appears to produce diminishing returns. Basically, the more likely you are to get caught, there's eventually it does not work out that if you have 100% certainty that you're going to get caught doing the crime, there's not 100% certainty that you won't commit the crime. Let's see what's in here. There is a balance to be found in certainty. Raising the probability of arrest and conviction to around 100% would involve significant social costs, including paying for a vast police force and surrendering individual privacy and liberty. Okay, so that's what they're saying. Having that kind of 100% certainty of being caught has its downsides. And then the other thing, there's evidence that the perceived probability of arrest must exceed 30% to have a meaningful deterrent effect, in that the deterrent effect increases until the perceived probability reaches about 70%. So basically, after a 70% probability that you're going to be caught for committing the crime, after that 70% certainty, it becomes the certainty becomes kind of a non-deterrent. It says here, but a probability above 70% offers only slightly more deterrence than the 70% probability. So, yeah, basically after 70%, certainty kind of loses its deterrent effect. And then there's celerity. The speed with which a person receives a consequence for violating the law has received the least amount of attention in scholarly literature. Studies suggest that the speed of punishment may not have any deterrent effect. At least one study suggests that individuals prefer to get their punishment over as quickly as possible. If correct, delayed punishment could actually be perceived as a worse consequence than immediate punishment. So it says in summary, the economic model of deterrence suggests that most crimes are committed by rational people who consider whether committing a crime is worth the risk of potential punishment. The theory assumes more people would commit crimes if there was no risk of punishment, and that increasing the risk will decrease crime, the risk of being caught. Risk could be increased primarily by increasing the penalty a person might face, or by increasing the likelihood that a person would be punished. Both components must exist. So let's move on. Lastly, I want to cover something that I found interesting. According to this report, transitions to adult court do not change behavior. Basically, if you are a minor and there's the threat that you will be tried as an adult in adult court, does not change behavior. It says here, studies have explored the transition from juvenile court to adult court. Juveniles can be put in detention but are not sent to prison unless they are tried as adults. If the threat of a prison sentence has a deterrent effect, then a person who might commit a crime as a juvenile should be less likely to commit the same offense as an adult. However, several studies found that there was no significant change in offenders, even when they perceived that the threat of imprisonment had increased. The dramatic increase in potential punishment did not have a deterrent effect on juvenile crime. So that kind of surprised me, actually. So in summary, I will put the link to this report in the show notes. Everyone, please make sure you subscribe to the Stanley Cross channel if you are new to the channel. Also, I do a nightly, well, almost nightly show, overnight show on the John Galt Urban Landlord channel. Please make sure that you subscribe to the John Galt Urban Landlord channel. I welcome comments in the any comments that you might have, and I actually do read the comments generally because I don't get many of them. So also make sure you hit the like button for this video. I'd appreciate it. And I do have another one coming out fairly soon. I don't know if it'll be maybe in the next day or two, or over the weekend maybe. So I will see you all on the next one, and make sure you catch me on Stanley versus the World. Usually it's roughly, let's say, Monday through Thursday mornings at about 3:45 or so. Sometimes I'll do one on Friday, or if I have a bunch of loose ends that I didn't get through get to during the Monday through Thursday period. I might wind up doing, say, a 9 o'clock show on a Friday. Depends on what's going on. But anyway, I will see you on Stanley versus the World, and you all hope you enjoyed this.